What's up, everybody? I'm Little Loop, and today I'm going to be sharing what I've learned just based on my personal experiences in the radio, television, and film and music industries. If you're already familiar with these industries and you feel like you can relate to some of these experiences, or even if you're not and you feel like you've learned something new, please drop a comment and be sure to like and subscribe to this channel because this video is just the beginning. Also, just a disclaimer before I get started. I'm not going to be naming any names here because I don't want to call anyone out or burn any bridges. But that being said, I'm going to try to be as transparent and honest as I possibly can. So, a little bit about me. I started playing music. I guess the first instrument I started learning was violin as a kid. I took lessons, I played in school. I eventually outgrew my violin, so I moved to cello in middle school. Played that for a little while. Fell in love with the guitar back when Guitar Hero 3 came out. I remember I didn't know who Slash was at the time. I just remembered seeing this mysterious cool guy and being like, man, I dig that dude. Like, I want to be like that guy. And then I got his autobiography again when I was like, at this point, 12, 13 years old. Read that cover to cover twice and would like, from that point on, knew like, this guy, this is what I want. I want to be a freaking rock star from the 80s. Like, I want to be, doing drugs and banging groupies. Like, I was like, that was going to be in my little 13-year-old brain, what my adult life looked like. And looking back on it now as a 30 something, oh God. Yeah, needless to say, did not happen for me personally. Did not pan out that way. But it did kind of kickstart a lifelong journey and love of music, and that has kind of always been like my dream, my ultimate goal. And I over the years kind of hot potatoed to different instruments. I always wanted to be in a band. I always wanted to be not like the front man or singer or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of be somebody playing an instrument in the background, preferably guitar. But that's always kind of been what I, as a kid, thought, I was going to end up doing. But I learned over years that it wasn't, at least not for me, it was not that simple. Back when I was first getting into playing guitar as like a middle schooler, even in high school, I tried starting bands. I tried networking with other people that played, instruments. And a lot of the times, the ones who were serious about it were already in a band. They were already pretty tight knit. They had their little clique. And I was just kind of like this fringe, orbiter, never really could get through to those, be one of the in crowd or whatever there. So, never really panned out with those. The friends that I did make bands with at that age, usually as a teenager and in college, or young adult, I had a lot of friends that were like, yeah, I'll be in a band. Yeah, let's make a band. And we would not actually play music. We wouldn't even, rehearse at all or write songs. I mean, we would kind of halfway write songs, but we spent more time talking about, oh yeah, we're going to play these shows, or, oh, let's, wear these costumes, or, making a Facebook page for our band that we hadn't really done anything with, like never played any shows. Like, it was just all talk. And I learned a lot of people like the idea of being a musician more than doing the hard work of like trying to play music. And so that was kind of one of the things that I had to learn starting out, is like, that you got to do the hard part first. You can't start with the fun stuff like, oh, let's design a logo and think of a name and, do all this design stuff. It's like, no, you got to get good at your instrument first off, like practice, come up with something to present, first, before getting the word out there. Like, that's putting the cart before the horse, kind of. And a lot of times too, another thing that would happen is like, we would have, say for instance, a guitarist and a singer and a bassist, but no drummer, or a singer, guitarist, bass, drummer, but no bassist. And, or, there would be like one piece missing, and we would let that get in the way of making any real progress. Maybe we would still rehearse or something, but we wouldn't actually get out there and play shows because we felt like, oh, we can't, we're not ready because we don't have all the pieces yet. And that's another one of those things that I, over the years, learned that you can't let that stop you. You can't let that get in the way, that you just kind of sometimes got to adapt and maybe play an acoustic version, or maybe play without a bassist, or, it might not sound exactly like you want it to sound, but it's better than nothing. If you want to play at the end of the day, like, you got to just do what you can with what you got. And that's kind of, I feel like, again, one of those things that separates the people who like the idea of doing it more than really doing it. I feel like being adaptable and flexible and just working with what you got, even if it's less than, what you would like sometimes that's all you got, you got no choice. And another thing that I feel like I encountered a lot were people who said they wanted to manage me, like, oh, I'll be your manager. But didn't actually get me any gigs, which is, I feel like, the whole point of a manager is to help negotiate and fight for you and help you grow and promote you and be your cheerleader. And a lot of these so-called managers were just people, not every time, but most of the time, they're just dudes that were trying to get in my pants, and they're like, oh yeah, I'll manage you. Oh, okay, yeah, but you gotta, quid pro quo. Like, and when I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that, dude, like, that's not part of the deal, they suddenly would not, be available or not be willing to help anymore. Or the alternative is like, they wanted me to change core aspects of myself that I was just not willing to change. And in hindsight, it's like, okay, well, maybe that's just because they had more experience in, one genre, but not whatever I was doing. They didn't really, or their connections weren't really geared towards my kind of music. And at the end of the day, like, that's fine. It just means it wasn't a good fit. But that's one of those things that I think, had I felt like, oh, I need to do this because this person told me to, I don't think it would have felt really authentic. It wouldn't have really been me. And so at that point, I just kind of decided, like, no, I'm going to stick with my thing. If that means I don't have somebody being my cheerleader, so be it. But that was just kind of, I mean, and not to say I didn't implement any of the changes. I mean, I will say when I first started out playing, back in like my late teens, I would, like, for example, I would just perform in whatever was comfortable, whatever I happened to be wearing that day. If it was gym shorts or sweatpants and a, raggedy shirt, like, I would have been like, whatever, or flip-flops, like, I wouldn't care. And one thing I learned over the years with that is, like, and I've had multiple people, not just like these manager types, but just people in general, tell me that, basically what you wear on stage does matter, because you're giving kind of an impression. It's part of your image. Like, people are going to remember you based on what you look like. So if you look like you don't give a shit, like, they're not going to give a shit, And so that's, you kind of have to put some thought into how you want to be perceived and kind of tailor it, accordingly to get the kind of audience that would resonate with your music the best, I think. I say it's better to approach it like a job interview, because you never know who's going to be watching. It could be somebody that could help you grow your career in some way. If they see that you look like you're taking it seriously, they might be more inclined to take you more seriously. So yeah, I would say a lot of these manager types are, and not even just them, but just people I've known who are also musicians or just knew a little bit about the industry would be like, oh, well, you got to look this way, you got to be that way, play this kind of music if you want to have mass appeal. And if that's what you're going for, if you want to be the next Taylor Swift, you want to be a big pop star, like, or country star even, if you want to be known in a particular popular genre, then I feel like, yeah, that's true. Like, you do kind of need to follow certain rules and kind of be able to fit into a certain category. But that didn't really work for me personally. And it's just, you know, if somebody's telling you got to change core values and parts of your identity to fit in this box, like, you got to know, and it's up to you. Like, I can't tell you what choice is the right choice in that regard, because it's only you know you. So I can just tell you, for me, I knew that wasn't going to work, and so I decided, no, I'm not doing that. But if that's what you want, then maybe that's what you got to do. Like, you know, I never really wanted to be a big pop star. I never, was trying to be on that level of fame and success, I guess. And I never saw myself being that kind of person. So I just knew that wouldn't work for me. But yeah, that's not to say it couldn't work for you. So I will say some bad advice that I followed, kind of following the cart before the horse stuff, and is I saw this independent artist online who had a blog and was basically one of those, like, how to be a successful musician while being independent. And at the time I was like, yeah, that's pretty much the boat I'm in. I'm an independent artist. I'm trying to make a living doing this. So yeah, let me see what this guy's got to say about it. And I remember he really prioritized selling merch. He was like, even when you get, or I guess whenever you get signed by major labels nowadays, because everybody, it used to be pre-streaming era, it was all about record sales, so they would get a majority profit from the sales of all the CDs or whatever, and the artist got to keep most of the merch sales. That was where the artist made their money. Well, nowadays, now that nobody's really paying for music as much, they're dipping their fingers into the merch money. So that's kind of, because that's where the money is. If you're not selling physical, copies of your music as much, if that's not moving. So I tried to follow that advice back when I was first starting out as an independent artist. And I just blew my freaking wad. I spent so much money getting all of these shirts made and didn't think about the fact that no one knew who I was yet. So it's like, who's going to want to buy these shirts? Aside from my handful of friends and family members that were like, yeah, I'll do it to support you, But without an audience, without a fan base, without anybody knowing who you are or caring to have your name on their shirt, it was a little premature in hindsight. But at the time, I was just so desperate to make money playing music that I was just like, yeah, if the merch, okay, t-shirts, yeah, that's the way to go, okay. And I mean, I think I still have them sitting in a box somewhere, just probably collecting dust. But in hindsight, yeah. And I've even been in bands where they had shirts made that the band broke up before the shirts were even sold, or or had designs that never got printed because it was just too premature. So after encountering just pitfall after pitfall with all this music stuff, this is, again, we're talking late teens, early 20s, I reached a point where I was like, okay, if maybe the music thing's not going to pan out, maybe I need to find another sort of in to that, way to break through the industry. And I remember, people when I was younger used to be like, oh, because I'm really tall, they'd be like, oh, you should model. And, getting into acting and thinking oh, this is a fun, in hindsight, I feel like acting was a fun hobby. Acting, I felt was the hobby. Music was really the passion, the thing I really wanted to do. But I figured, hey, if the music thing's not panning out, maybe I can give one of these other things a go. And if that kind of, helps me segue into music, maybe I can pull a Johnny Depp. I think I read somewhere he started out trying to be a musician ended up becoming a movie star. And then once he was like rich and famous, he's like, yeah, let me go make a band with, Alice Cooper and whatever, you know what I mean? Like all these big famous musicians. Like when you have that level of fame and success and clout, you can do that kind of thing. So I thought, well, maybe if I could do that, then that'll give me an in or a way to be able to play music. And so I remember for a time I tried getting into modeling because at the time I was young enough, I had the height. But I learned quickly that, man, there's so many scams. Like it's really hard. I feel like as hard as music was, I feel like modeling was even harder, even more competitive, even more strict. And I don't know that it's that way now, but I mean, we're talking, this is like close to 15 years ago at this point. So back then, you still basically had to be a twig to be considered a model. And I was always just barely outside of that. I was like average healthy. I wasn't underweight. Like I wasn't curvy. I was built to be a twig, but I just was, I like sugar. I like eating. I couldn't, I play a lot of video games. I don't go to the gym that much. I should, but I and so, I got a lot of thanks, but no thanks on the modeling front. And, from actual legitimate agencies. I noticed there were, other modeling agencies that were like, yeah, you're great. Oh yeah, we'll sign you. Oh, here's some free headshots. But then they expected thousands of dollars up front to represent me. And I mean, for anyone considering any kind of, not just modeling, but, I mean, this applies to music. This applies to acting. This applies to anything in that any of the entertainment industry subgenres. Like, if anyone ever asks you to pay up front, it's a scam. 100%, hands down. Like, I see people all the time question, and I have questioned too. At times, there's a lot of pay-to-play type schemes, and I've played in bands where they try to do that kind of stuff, and it's not worth it. Like, you're there to make money, and they should be making money off of you by getting you out there. Like, if you are paying them, where's their incentive to grow you? You know what I mean? And so, it's one of those things that you would think it'd be common sense, but I feel like a lot of people clearly must not know, because otherwise how do these places stay in business? You would think, they should be shut down, but they're still somehow operating after all these years. So, just a little PSA for anyone out there wondering about, if you've encountered something like that. And I tried getting into acting and, I remember I was like broke, early 20s, college dropout, trying to get into acting at the time. And I remember I poured every dollar I had. Like, I am scrimping. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I put like the few $100s I could scrounge up to, into an acting class. And I remember thinking like, yeah, if I have an acting class, if that counts as education and training on my resume, maybe I'll be more likely to get booked, because I was trying to audition for stuff and I didn't have any kind of resume. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any training. I was like, maybe if I have a class on there, I'll have a little better luck. And once I took that class, I realized, at the end of the class, which it was very informative, it was very helpful. But I realized like, oh, this is just the beginning. This is just like an intro baby 101 level course. They want you to take a whole fleet of classes before you're like really, seasoned or trained or ready on a professional level. This is just like dipping a toe in, basically. And it would have been thousands of dollars for me to do the whole program. I mean, it's basically at that point kind of like going to a trade school or college or something like that level of training. And in order to really grow, I mean, it's like any industry. Like, in order to really grow, you got to kind of get the tools and classes help a lot with that. Some people luck out and can be successful and not take a class. And that wasn't me. And I feel like that's most people. That's very, very rare. It's a rare exception. And I just think, I guess I realized even, and even that school that I took that class at, they had seminars that you could attend, and they would help you get seen, by casting directors, agencies. That really, it did help with building your portfolio and resume and all that, and being taken more seriously. But those also cost money. Those also, it's hundreds more dollars for that. And even then, like, those people are going to want to see headshots, which also cost hundreds of dollars. And at that time, I think my headshots may have been like, not quite like bathroom selfie level bad, but like, my friend maybe taking a picture of me on a phone. Like, it was not professional by any means. And, in hindsight, and even at the time, I kind of knew it screamed amateur, but I just didn't, I'm like, I have no money for this. Like, it costs hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just to have a shot at, looking professional enough to get a gig. And at that point in time in my life, I just didn't have that kind of money. And I was like, I don't understand how people can get into this stuff. I mean, you're like, actors are known for being struggling and broke because it's very rare that they actually land a paying gig. And so I'm like, how are you expected to pay hundreds of dollars just for headshots and take all these classes and do all these things? I just was like, I reached a point at that time. I was like, there's just no way. Like, I just couldn't afford it. It was just prohibitively expensive for me at the time. And, from what I was making, and I just couldn't afford it. I mean, I was like essentially homeless at the time that I took that class. And, in fact, I think I became homeless very shortly after taking that class, because that's how broke I was. And I've heard stories about now famous actors who at one point were living in their car or were, homeless because they just couldn't afford to. And I could do that for like short term. I could not do that for like years on end. And for something that's not a guarantee, like, they lucked out that they managed to land big roles and become famous and successful. But, for every one famous, successful person, there's plenty of people that don't go anywhere. And so it's like, what are the odds that you're going to be the one that makes it? I don't know, so, and again, going back to acting for me was more of a hobby. It wasn't, if I was like, I want to be the next Meryl Streep, then like, I probably would have stuck through with it if that was like really my end goal. But to me, it was like, this is supposed to be an alternative to playing music. Like, if I'm going to struggle, I'd rather struggle for music than acting personally. So I pivoted and I started focusing more on playing open mics and kind of trying to grow myself as an artist and get kind of more in the scene. And I gave up the idea of trying to start a band just because they never went anywhere. It was so, and even the other bands that I had become acquainted with, most of those bands to this day have broken up. They've since gone on and, they're either no longer friends, or they're in other bands, or they just never went anywhere. And, I reached a point where I realized like the odds of getting the same group of people to stick together long enough and not have disagreements and not have creative differences and not have personal issues that get in the way of being able to like make this commitment. I mean, it kind of is like having a romantic relationship, but with 4 or 5 people. Like, you've got that level of commitment and expectation of like, I want you to show up regularly and take this seriously and kind of, not necessarily revolve your life around this, but kind of treat it like something that you want to do long term. And the odds of just, for me at least, getting that many people that were that serious and that available and had similar taste in music to me at the time. I just was like, if I keep waiting around for this to happen, it's never going to happen. And I remember I've always been like a big Nine Inch Nails fan. I remember reading an interview that Trent Reznor had done early on in his career where he basically said he reached the same point. He was like in all these, 80s cheesy bands and was like, man, I'm not really digging this music, and also wanted to be in a band, but kind of reached a point where he was like, well, for me to do what I want to do, I'm just going to have to do it myself. And, that's how he started Nine Inch Nails. And it was just kind of a sort of solo project, but it, he had enough friends that played instruments. He was able to get, other musicians to kind of basically be like backing musicians at the time. And so I kind of reached that point where I was like, okay, if I can't go the band route, I'll just go like the solo artist route and hire, I guess, backing musicians once I reach that point. But I've been lucky enough to have friends over the years that were willing to play with me for certain shows. But that's another thing I learned is like, they're expensive too. You got to pay for musicians if you want them to play with you, typically in a setup like that, whereas if you were in a band with people where it was all equal ownership, then that expectation of like, well, I want to be paid up front isn't really there. It's like, no, we'll all struggle in this together. We'll all be broke together. We'll all play gigs for peanuts, if anything, together. When you're first starting out. But if you're trying to go that route as a solo artist, unless you just happen to have hundreds of dollars to pay for backing musicians up front, like that's just not, which I couldn't even do that for headshots, like in acting stuff. Like I couldn't do that for backing. So I just did, the acoustic singer-songwriter type stuff and would play open mics like that. Just solo acoustic sets. Because it was that or don't play. And at that point, I kind of was like, I'm done waiting for everything to be perfect. Like, I'm just going to get out there and do it. And I did. And I started, networking and making friends. I started kind of getting known in the local scene a little bit. People started recognizing me. I was like, oh, that's a really cool feeling. And then I had like a 7-year hiatus. All that progress came to a complete stop. Because for all that time I had been single, and once I got in a relationship with my now ex-husband, I just totally, like, that just ate up all my time. I got married, I had a kid, I got divorced, and then I had to basically re-enter that whole sphere, that whole learning how to get back in touch with, like, oh, this is who I am, this is my identity. It's no longer wrapped up in this other person anymore. And once I kind of started having to rediscover and get back out there and do kind of like start over from square one, by that point I was in my late 20s. I was now having to navigate it as a single parent who had, at that time, zero help from my ex. It was just, any kind of help I had, I pretty much had to pay for to get any kind of break. And with my kids still so young, I mean, this was like, we're talking not even preschool age, like toddler age, you know what I mean? And so I can't just, they're in school all day. Like, I had to pay for, daycares and sitters and, just all this stuff. And, kids are expensive. So now I'm back to where I was in my early 20s, but with the added expense of a child. And that's like, takes up all this extra money and time. So it's like, I'm on, I went from like whatever hard mode to now I'm on like expert, nightmare mode, you know what I mean? Like impossible difficulty. And at that point, all those people that I had known in my early 20s had either like moved and just weren't even around anymore, or, it'd been so long that like, either I might not recognize them, or if I saw them, I'd be like, would they even recognize me? Like, it's been a long time. I wasn't really in the scene anymore because I didn't go to shows very much. I didn't hang out very much. I didn't do, hardly any of the stuff that I used to do once I got in that relationship. And so I had gotten to a point where, for a while I had to just prioritize like getting money and taking care of my kid and supporting myself. And so I started working as a diesel mechanic because I was like, hey, it makes good money, and it's like one of those things that you can always get a job anywhere. There's people always hiring. Like, it's a very useful trade or skill set to have. So I got a job that was stable, that was paying pretty decently, and I decided, hey, now that I have the money, now that I have this like little bit of extra income, I'll go ahead and revisit that acting stuff, because that was kind of what got in the way before. At this point, I was way too old to be modeling. No, nobody wanted a model, in their late 20s. Like, that's ancient by model standards. So I was like, I'll just try the acting thing. And I started taking acting classes, got headshots, did all that stuff. And I realized, I took the rest of my classes at that same place that I had taken that one class in my early 20s. And I realized, like, man, it's so, like, it's the same process. It's the same, like, in some ways it hadn't changed at all. But, I mean, the people were completely different. I was suddenly the old one. And everybody else there was either the age that I was when I took my first class there, or, younger. We're talking like children or teenagers that, their parents are paying for all these classes, and, it's like we're talking like Disney star type stuff. And, they're all trying to be the next whatever. And so I don't know who's cool in today's Disney world. Any references I'd make are like 10, 20 plus years old. So I'm not even going to try to say, oh, whoever's the big star now. But yeah, I mean, I was like the old one there. And all these like younger people had way more experience, had been booked on things, and had extensive resumes. And I was like, yeah, I've taken like some classes here, and I'm like way older than y'all, and that's what I got going, woo, and yeah, like, I was probably like one of the few rare people. I mean, not to say there weren't older people there, but it was exceedingly rare that anyone there was like over 25. And, but, I went to like the seminars. I kind of got to where people started to kind of know me there too. And got to, get in front of these agencies. But again, they were not signing me. And they would, at the seminars, the nice thing is that they would give feedback. So usually they would say like, oh, work on this, or, here's how you did on a scale of 1 to 5 or something like that. And, they would kind of rate your performance and give you notes and stuff, which is really helpful. But the frustrating thing for me is like, no one really, they could give me a reason. Like, they just were like, yeah, good job. Wow, that was really good. But then they wouldn't follow up to sign me. And I'm like, okay, well, if it was good, then why don't you want me? Like, what the heck? But I ended up, completely unrelated to that school, but I ended up befriending somebody who had a history of also going to that same place and knowing those agents. And he literally, I made the right connection, because he called up one of these agencies and basically like, was like, hey, sign this person. Got me the hookup essentially. And with that one, like maybe 30-minute phone call that one person made, that agency that I had been trying to get signed with since I was a teenager, like for modeling, that had rejected me multiple times, they called me up and they're like, yeah, we'll sign you. And I was like, wow, like, this was my dream agency. This is who I had been wanting to get signed with these people for like a decade. Even longer, possibly. Like, yeah, like over a decade. I was like, man, if I if I could get signed by these people, all know that I've made it. You know what I mean? And it it's just crazy that like all the classes and all the seminar, like that didn't do it. It was knowing the right person. That's what did it. And I feel like that also kind of goes for a lot of how people get places in the industry. It's just, it really comes down to knowing the right people. And it's hard, and I will say something I realized after being signed to that agency. I started getting way more auditions than I had before, because they were submitting me, for projects that if I had not been represented, I would not have been able to get submitted for, like serious projects. And they had all these relationships with casting directors and all these things that I didn't have. So they were able to refer me to other places and other people and be like, hey, go here, take this class. Hey, go train with this person, and, go audition for these things, and things that I would not have been able to do. So it did open the door for a lot of opportunities that otherwise I would not have been able to get. And that was awesome. It was great for the experience, but, I was signed to that agency for over a year and didn't book a single gig. Got a couple of callbacks, but they never went anywhere. And they eventually ended up dropping me. And I can't say I blame them, because again, I wasn't making them money. But that was kind of an eye-opener for me, that like, oh, just because you have an agent, that doesn't mean like you're going to book. Like, that doesn't mean like, oh, you've made it, you're going to start making the big money now. Like, even with an agent, it's still just as difficult to break into it as it was before. And so once that didn't pan out, or I should say, I guess concurrently with that going on, I was also, also trying to still do the music stuff. I had a song, an EP's worth of songs that I was trying to get professionally tracked and mixed and all that stuff. And I'm still kind of in this process, because I've like, that's been a learning experience too. Like, back when I first wrote all these songs in my early 20s, I didn't have the money to pay for like a professional studio, and I was learning, some of this stuff on my own, like mixing and a little bit about mixing, but mostly like tracking demos and stuff like that. And I've, gotten proficient enough that I could track a demo, but it's not going to sound probably as like professional, or, it's not going to be as good quality as if I had gone to an actual studio. And it's not like my mixing chops are not there, they're not, I'm not going to be on the level of like somebody who has the ear for it, who can really isolate like, oh, here's where all these levels need to be, and here's how to build the sound, and all the stuff like that. Like I'm not that experienced, and that would be a whole other, I guess, skill set or thing that, people go to school for. Like I asked people that work in these studios, I'm like, how did you learn all this stuff? And they're like, oh, I went to school for it. And I was like, oh man, like I tried, when I was in college, I took some free courses that, they offered there for some of these DAWs, I guess, is, like Pro Tools and Reaper and stuff like that. And, man, I tried, like, just kind of like as a dip my toe in kind of way, like, oh, maybe if I go to school, like I can do this too. But just from like showing these other people showing me how to do these things, I'm like, this is just so much. There's just so much that goes into it to really do it right, that and it's always, the software is always changing, each program's different, in its own way. And it just, I reached a point for me where I was like, I'm gonna forget, like, I'm so forgetful, I'm like, I'm not gonna remember all these little tips and tricks and like details that you're gonna have to, like, you have to be so detail oriented, and remember a lot of stuff to really get it down. And I just kind of reached a point where I was like, this is too much for me. So I was like, I'm gonna have to pay somebody to get it done right, and make it sound the way I want it to sound. And that has been an ongoing process for me, because a lot of these people that I've contacted or worked with to get my songs tracked and mixed and everything, it's kind of like finding a band all over again. You got to find people who are going to be reliable and who are going to be communicative and consistent, and whose views and values and experiences and tastes align with yours. And I at this point in time, I just haven't quite 100% gotten that. I found people who were professional, who were really good. They just didn't their style just didn't match with what I was going for. And that's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't a good fit. And, I've reached out to, I couldn't tell you how many studios that either would like follow up and then ghost, or just wouldn't even do that, But I like most of these actual like professional recording studios, it's like, I couldn't tell you how many people I would be like, hey, can I do this? And maybe they would get back to me, maybe they wouldn't. And then if they did, and I would give them more details, or I would try to set up a time to come tour the studio or whatever, or say, hey, when's a day that I can come in and track these, or some, whatever it was. Ghost, like gone. And so it's just really hard. And I'm kind of like, this is one of those things I'm still kind of in the midst of. It's really hard to find, people who, cause there's plenty of people who know how to mix, but it's not a one size fits all thing. It's like I said, like finding a band. Like you've got to find people that they line up with you, and you guys can be on the same wavelength about stuff, and have the same vision for things, and and yeah, like all that other stuff, it factors in. So it's an ongoing process. And there's a lot of like scammy people with that too, where it's like, oh yeah, pay me up front, and then you get like this half finished product that's like, you're like, this isn't what I want it to sound like. Like I want these things changed to make it what I want it to be. And they're like, nope, that's what you get. I did it. I did the thing. You can't accuse me of not doing it because I did it technically. And it's like, well, okay, but like, like one mix isn't, it's like usually when you pay for something, you're, I don't know. Speaking of getting scammed, I mean, throughout this whole process, I got scammed out of my life savings. Like there had been multiple times where I had money saved up that I was like, this is my fund for, paying for studio time, or paying for, musicians, or merch, or promotion, or marketing, or any of these things. And I, for one reason or another, just got scammed out of, we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars. And, anytime I would save up a massive like amount of money like that, and so, it's like those things get in the way, because it's like, man, and I remember one time I was in a band that, when I joined, it was like, yeah, we're all equal parts of this band. We're all members, and they had like a costumey gimmick. At least when I first joined, it was like, yeah, if you can have a costume, like if you can have like an alter ego kind of thing, then yeah, that'd be cool. That's like bonus, woo. And so I spent hundreds of dollars on just fancy costumes and extra gear they wanted me to have to play this particular type of music. And, I can't tell you how much money I spent on gas to go to rehearsals and driving to gigs and all these things. And every time that we played a show, I was like, okay, can we I'll get a cut of whatever that show paid. And like this band had already been formed before I joined. I was there. I joined to replace somebody else that they had fired. So they had already kind of worked out their system before I just kind of hopped in, and I was like, I'm just here. But when it came time to play shows, I'd be like, okay, how are we going to split it up? And they're like, oh, well, the singer keeps all the money. because that goes back into like studio time and merch and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then I'm thinking like, well, how are the rest of us going to get paid? You know what I mean? And, we came out with, like, for instance, we recorded a music video for one of our singles. And the singer put the music video on his personal channel. But then he was like, well, I have more followers than the band account. So, or like, oh, we don't need a band account because I already have a following. And it's like, well, but we're a band. So we should have a band account. Like, just direct them to the band account, and that was kind of an ongoing point of contention. And, same with like selling merch. It's like, we didn't get any of the merch sales. All of it went to the singer. And after a while, people kind of started getting wise to it. Like, okay, you're saying we're a band, but then you're keeping everything for yourself and acting like it's a solo project and we're like your hired guns, but we're not getting paid to be your hired guns. Like, that's not the understanding we had here. And so ultimately, and this is kind of a pattern I've noticed with all the other bands I've been in too, but ultimately that band sort of fell apart, and it was a domino effect. Every band I've been in that has broken up, it's always like, it always starts with one person quitting. One person decides, like, for one reason or another. And it's funny because in my experience, it's almost always the drummer. And the drummer is like the backbone of the band. That's who keeps it all together, I feel like. But, like one person, in this case, it wasn't, I guess, technically the drummer. But that was kind of the really defining moment, I feel like, for this particular band. But I feel like, once one person quits a band, it's just a matter of time till everybody else ends up quitting. Because it really is just like one person quits and we're like, that's fine, you can get it, or we'll try to replace them, or we'll just keep powering on, whatever. And then a month or a few weeks or whatever later, somebody else quits, and then somebody else quits. And the next thing you know, you're like, okay, I guess we're not a band anymore. That's cool. And so that kind of, that basically was what ended up happening with that band. And so I was like, man, I spent who knows how much money on costumes and gear and gas, and wear and tear on my car, like, for what, it was fun and I got to meet cool people, but it wasn't my kind of music that I was playing. Like, I kind of, even though we were a band, like, I essentially viewed myself as like a hired gun from day one. So to do all that and then be like, okay, where's the payment part? Like, if I tried to do this, there's no freaking way I would have made it as far as this guy. Like, people wouldn't be going to the studio and playing all these gigs and stuff, without getting paid. Like, I don't have that kind of charisma, I guess. I don't know, but, or I'm just too honest. I don't know. But that's, I don't know. That's another, I guess, experience I had. And that's just for, music and acting stuff. I also, I work in radio currently. I guess you could say radio is like my day job. It's basically the closest I could get to working a 9-to-5 type, something steady and consistent that is music adjacent. Although it's not, I wouldn't consider it ideal exactly, at least not where I'm at right now. But it has taught me a lot about the industry as a whole. It's kind of given me an inside look into how kind of this whole system operates, and how the people who are able to successfully navigate it, the mindset that they have to pull it off. I feel like it takes a certain kind of person to be able to successfully live within that world. I'll go more in depth with it on my next video, which I'll have linked in the description. So be sure to check that out. And in that video, I'll also kind of, provide a more in-depth analysis into the industry, and also how you can kind of navigate it if you're an independent artist and you're wanting to get your music out there, if you want to have your songs played on the radio. I've encountered a lot of independent artists through my work that have asked questions about that. I'll get more into details on that on the next video, as well as just advice that I would offer for anyone that's interested in trying to make a living in any kind of creative industry. It's hard. It's when you're trying to pursue your passion and you have this artistic mindset, but the world doesn't operate. It doesn't reward artistry. It does what makes money. That's what makes the world go round. So if you liked this video, I think you made it this far, I appreciate you watching. Be sure to like it and subscribe. That would help me out immensely. If you feel like you learned anything, or even if you found something, I guess, relatable, be sure to leave a comment. I would love to hear other people's experiences, and be sure to check out my next video. Thanks for watching.